GALP.
GALP is back, and with no ad breaks, we just focus on getting you the best content without the fluff. Now, speaking of the fluff, here comes a disclaimer, and I know you guys love that disclaimer, don't you? For you new folks, GALP is a weekly gaming discussion podcast under the GALP Podcast Network. We talk about all sorts of games, from big AAA titles all the way to awesome indie games, but our forte is Japanese games, so expect that a lot. We can be found anywhere where you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and now on YouTube. Whilst you're there, be sure to give us a 5-star review, give us a like, subscribe while you're at it, and remember, if you want to join in on the fun, then follow us on any of the socials that we have, including Blue Sky, that's a new one, TikTok, Instagram, and X. I hate calling it X, but that's the name of it now, at GAL Podcasts. Anyway, back into the episode. Today, we're going to be talking about one of Koei's greatest and oldest game franchise. No, not Dynasty Warriors, or Dynasty Warriors, as we're supposed to call it in the UK, although both series follow a very similar storyline. Is it Kasen? Kasen 2? Bish, are we talking about Kasen? You know what? I wish. I really wish. I wish, truly. I would love it if Koei remade the Kasen trilogy, or if they made a new game in the series, or if they just gave us a new Bladestorm game. I would be happy with a new Bladestorm game at this point, even though I'm not a fan of Bladestorm, but, you know, I'd be happy with it. No, we're not talking about Kasen. We're actually talking about Romance of the Three Kingdoms 8 Remake. Now, I'm going to say this off the bat. We reviewed other Romance of the Three Kingdoms games, as well as Nobunaga's Ambitions games, but I was initially disappointed with the localization of this game. Sangokushi 13 and 11 had Chinese audio options, which makes sense considering that this game is based off a Chinese novel. In fact, it's named after a Chinese novel, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, right? So this put a bitter taste in my mouth. These sort of simulation games are very text heavy, so I understand localization can cost a fair bit, but Koei does save a lot of money by not having much 3D assets. I'll put an asterisk next to that because they do have 3D assets in cutscenes and in duels and jewels. People don't understand when I say jewels. Duels. Should I say it like that? Should I say duels? I say duels, but okay, I'll call, you know what I mean, right? The one-on-one combat. So they have 3D assets for that, but mostly it's 2D assets. And especially considering this game is basically one massive visual novel, effectively, there is a lot of text, and it would have been nice to have an English dub. It would have helped me and many others get more immersed into the gameplay. And here's hoping that Koei adds at least Chinese audio in a patch, or maybe, you know, forget about this game and just add it for Dynasty Warriors Origins, which we're going to be talking about next week. We're going to be talking about that demo in full detail. We're going to strip it apart, talk about every single thing about that demo, so stick around for that. Let's put all of that aside and talk about the game, okay? I could stay on that start screen for hours and hours and hours listening to the intro music. It's very amazing, it's fantastic, it sets the tone, really. That's what I love about core Shibusawa games, right? The soundtracks in these games add to the immersion, add to the atmosphere. It makes you feel like you're part of the world. And you know what? It doesn't disappoint. The game has multiple options where you can choose from the remade audio as well as the original audio tracks. Personally, I stayed with the remakes audio because I've never played Romance of Three Kingdoms 8 before, a game that was originally on the PlayStation 2. I think it released in like 2001 or something like that. Anyway, as always, there is an edit feature, which is very common in Romance of the Three Kingdoms games, and it allows you to edit historical figures and also create original officers. It's very basic, but it's always been basic in Romance of the Three Kingdoms. It's a bit more of an afterthought compared to games like Dynasty Warriors Empires, a series where the create a character system is far more robust. But that's because it's got 3D character models. That's not to say that this edit mode was not an enjoyable experience. In fact, it was. I spent a good few hours messing around, creating characters, deciding who their sworn siblings would be, who would they be married to, amongst other things. If you pick a male character, you can have 3 wives/concubines, but a female character can only have 1 spouse. And it makes sense because this is a historical simulation. This sort of thing was very commonplace back then. And the historical simulation continues throughout the Create a Warrior mode. You're able to select your parents, as well as sworn siblings, but you're only limited to people who are alive during your lifespan. I think that's very interesting. For example, if you select your birth year as 135 AD, then you cannot select a mother. There is no female characters in this game who were alive before that point. And the only father you can have is Dongfu. Who is Dongfu? I don't know. But he's the only person who can be your parent if you decide to choose to be born in 135 AD. Now, if you want a very long lifespan and want to experience most of the game with that lifespan, I'd recommend having a lifespan of 99 years, right? And choosing the birth year of 168 AD, because then that means your character would be 18 years old during the Yellow Turban Rebellion and 41 years old during the Battle of Cherby. So they're not really an old man by that point. They're still quite young and quite spry, I guess. And some people are like, well, actually, Bish, in your 40s, you wouldn't be fighting. Well, you know what? There's a lot of people in that sort of era, Zhao Yun being one of them, Liao Hua being one of them, that have been fighting since the Yellow Turban Rebellion all the way until the fall of Shu, which, you know what? Shut up, all right? I know my shit, okay? But yeah, it still leaves you with two choices for a mother. But you know what? Genealogy aside, you're also able to assign characters who are synergetic towards you or characters who can be antagonistic towards you. It would be nice to have a nemesis or rival system in the game. You can kind of think where you can have characters tease you or try and one-up you in battle, similar to the sort of relationship between Zhuge Liang and Sima Yi in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms book. The edit mode plays a huge role in the main game, especially dependent on scenarios. For example, if your creator warrior isn't alive during the scenario, then you won't see them. If they weren't born during the time of Yellow Turban Rebellion, you're not going to see them. It just makes sense, right? And in games like Dynasty Warriors Empires, right, you'd see them even though they might not be born during that time or whatever. Although actually, I don't think you have the option to select when your character was born in Empires. I would actually love to see that, but I don't think we're going to get an Empires game, and I'll kind of talk about that towards the end of the podcast. Upon selecting a new game for the first time, you're introduced to the incredibly bubbly Jiao Ling, who acts as your guide throughout the game. And this is where I noticed that the game is no longer using static portraits. And it seems that Koei is getting into VTubing with a live 2D-esque model with minimal animation like idle sway, head bobbing, blinking and smiling, although there is no sort of lip movements or lip flaps or anything like that when the characters are talking. It looks like Koei is using a proprietary engine to run something like that kind of allows for 2D rigging and animation, because they haven't been using Live 2D for this game. I've checked the licenses for this game. Live 2D is not mentioned, right? Legally, they'd have to mention if they were using Live 2D. And it's interesting because a lot of Japanese game devs in recent years have been using this tech. Think Marvelous, think Idea Factory, NIS America, etc. But it is kind of weird though, because Koei's implementation of it seems very eerie. Like, it doesn't seem natural. It seems quite uncanny. And I don't know if other people feel that way. If you do, let me know in the comments below. All right. Upon selection, you are greeted with 3 game styles. Recommended, which is basically for those who have never played Romance of the Three Kingdoms before. Officers, which will allow you to pick the first officer, then a time period they were active, which is fantastic if you want to experience a character's specific story. And then finally, there is scenario, where you choose a time period, then select an officer from that time. That's great if you want to experience a general story, or if you'd like to create your own scenario, for example. I decided to play the game under recommended, the main reason being that I don't really like to play Sangokushi. I find it incredibly boring at times, and I'm being honest here. I feel like I need a little bit of help, so that's what this mode is for. And I'm glad that Koei has added this for the new players and for people that may not like Sangokushi like me. Within this recommended mode, you have multiple options, and Jiao Ling guides you and gives you a set of questions for you to answer. Depending on your answers, you'll have a few people to choose from. For example, I was initially asked, do you want to stand above others and issue orders? And then you can select whether or not you want to control people with instructions, or if you want to play freely, if you want to choose, or if you want to control others. And then it asks whether you want to be more of a supporting role, or if you want to be standing on top for yourself. And depending on your answers, it will either select a ruler, in this case Cao Cao, a viceroy, who's Guan Yu, a governor, Zhou Yu, tactician, aka Zhuge Liang, a common officer, such as Lubu, and finally a free officer, which in this case is Sumai. If you want to play as specialty roles, then you must do it in one of the other game modes, and I believe that might be because introducing them would make the game more complex, especially for new players. I'm the type of person that I like freedom in my gameplay, so I decided to play as Sumai, who's Zhuge Liang's long-standing rival. What I love about free officer option is the fact that you can become the ruler yourself, or you can serve as an officer within someone else's army. And it's interesting that they've picked Sumai for this role due to the history of him and Cao Cao, and the fact that his family ended up ruling China in the end. As a Dynasty Warriors fan, this gameplay is not for me. And you know what? I do like strategy games, and I do like simulation games, but this game is very, very poorly paced. It doesn't help that the game's AI is often allying with one another, preventing major battles from occurring. This isn't a game that I can pick up and play for a few hours. I could do that with previous entries to an extent, right? And Nobunaga's Ambition was very good with that. But you need an entire day of gaming to feel like you've gotten anywhere meaningful in this game, unless you play a scenario in which anything goes and you don't follow any story. I think long-term fans of the series would be disappointed by the pacing, as well as some of the game's mechanics. It's great that Koei is mixing things up with minigames such as duels and debating, but it's basically the same thing reskinned, and it's a poor implementation at that. The game uses a playing card system for both duels and debates. The officer with better stats get a free hit due to their advantage, and then it's all dependent on what cards you're dealt. And don't worry, it's pretty easy to cheese this system, as you can already see your opponent's hand. The goal here is basically to deplete your opponent's health bar and have more health when the time runs out. To play an action, you either need 3 consecutive numbers or 2 of a kind. That means 2 identical numbers. My top tip, land as many hits as you can early on, if possible. Don't try and save your cards for a possibility of stronger attacks. If you play your cards right, then you can end a duel or a debate with a single turn by matching consecutive cards with a special move. Let's forget about duels and debates for now and talk about the main gameplay. Personally, I prefer combat in this game compared to previous entries in the series. It has a vague resemblance to the Iketsuden series, but also shares some mechanics with Dynasty Warriors Empires series, which makes sense considering that Dynasty Warriors Empires and Dynasty Warriors in general is a spin-off of Koei's most popular title at the time, Sangokushi, aka Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Now, I've never played the original Romance of the Three Kingdoms on the PlayStation 2. However, looking at gameplay footage, there's a lot of improvement, which makes sense. I would be worried if there wasn't any improvement. Battles are no longer ugly looking and clustered. You have a lot more range of movement compared to the original, and let's be honest, the visuals are absolutely stunning. I'd say this, as well as the music, are my favorite parts of the game. Similar to games like Kasen 3, you can decide on which troops you bring into battle, as well as their classes, or you can let the game assemble an army for you. Although be warned, it's not always going to pick the best armies for you, and that can lead to less than optimal battle scenarios. The battles themselves are pretty much like any other turn-based strategy game, and it's quite fun. Although, I would have loved to have seen more attack animations similar to games like Dynasty Warriors Godseekers or Fire Emblem Three Houses, both games made by Koei. I was quite disappointed in the announcement of this game about a year ago. Why did Koei decide to remake an older title? Why did Koei decide to pick Romance of the Three Kingdoms 8 to remake? What sort of significance does the 8th installment have? This wasn't even an anniversary title, so it's got me very confused. Was this Koei's way to generate hype for an upcoming Dynasty Warriors game? Because honestly, if that was the case, they should have given us a Muso remake. And I guess if you want an experience that is Romance of the Three Kingdoms themed and has elements of Romance of the Three Kingdoms, whether that is story, creating unique characters, playing as a ruler, or any random officer during the Three Kingdoms period, and can finish a scenario within 1 and 5 hours, then guess what? Dynasty Warriors Empires is the title for you. Dynasty Warriors Extreme Legends. Remember that? Oh, actually, that wasn't Dynasty Warriors. That was Samurai Warriors Extreme Legends. Oh my god, that was great. Remember when games used to have adverts? Well, I think that might be a Koei thing. Koei games used to have adverts for other Koei games inside the Koei games. That's how I knew about Kasen 2. That's how I knew about Kasen 3. That's how I knew about Samurai Warriors. Anyway, but that's besides the point. I don't think we'll be getting any more Empires or Extreme Legends titles with the release of Dynasty Warriors Origins. And I'll speak about that in next week's episode, where we talk all about the Dynasty Warriors Origins demo in detail. And maybe Koei decided to remake this game to test an engine. or to gauge interest in whether or not they should continue remaking PlayStation 2 titles. Now, if that's the case, I think they should have picked like a different PS2 title. Maybe like Dynasty Warriors 2, or maybe like Kasen. Come on, Koei, come on! But yeah, that was my thoughts on Romance of Three Kingdoms 8 Remake, a game that's good, but maybe not the game that Koei fans are expecting or even wanted. Anyway, that being said, we'll see you guys next week where we're going to be talking about Shin Sangoku Musou Origins. Bye bye. Janet.